We are here for what? DDD and bounded contexts. Hopefully, there is something that you'll spot here and take home. All right, so let's get started. So what are we all doing? We are building software, of course. So problem is that these softwares that we build, they're pretty complex, very hard, very abstract, and it's actually the business problem that's hard and abstract. But yeah, I mean, here is where we are. So the promise is that DDD is going to come save us all. It's going to be the Superman which comes in and says, okay, I'm going to help you untangle the big ball of yarn into these very neatly arranged strands of strings, right? So the way that it promises to do that is by saying that it will help you break down software into these things called subdomains, and these subdomains will have these boundaries called bounded contexts. Now that's clear as mud, no pun intended, right? So what exactly is a domain? What are these subdomains and bounded contexts? Very quickly, okay? So the way that this presentation is going to go is I've got two parts to this presentation. The first part, or actually the first quarter, if you will, is where we'll try and demystify some of these terms that DDD uses so that we are all on the same page when we go further. And then the second part is where I've got sort of a quiz, if you like quizzes, because it's close to lunchtime, so and I want to make sure that you people stay awake. So I'll occasionally ask you some questions, and if you have the answers, great. If not, I'll give you the answers. But anyway, so what's a domain, right? If you want to define a domain, it's basically the broad area that a business operates in. Okay, so that's really what it is. That's the problem space that we're trying to master. And what's an example? Here is an example. Online retail. Why? Because that's what works at conferences, right? So, but here it is. This is our for the purposes of this conversation, this is our digital empire. So the domain of online retail. So if you want to think of this, you can think of this as a map of what an online retail business does. So right from the unboxing to the I need that to you getting stuff delivered, all of that and everything in between is online retail. It's a pretty vast territory, of course, so that goes without saying. All right, so what are subdomains then? Basically, subdomains are smaller parts of the domain, because why? Humans tend to do better when you've got smaller focused problems to solve. Large problems obviously don't get the best out of us. At least that's what Eric Evans will have you believe. I think there is some truth to that. So by extension, it's basically part of the business problem. So it's one small portion of the business problem, or maybe a larger portion, but definitely a portion of the business problem. What does that look like? So here is our attempt at showing some of the subdomains involved in the online retail space. This is not meant to be exact. There are probably things that are missing. There are probably things that are maybe don't belong here, although I think most of them do. But if they don't, and you're part of a retail team and you see something, it's Gregor's fault. Anyway, so yeah, we've got all of this product catalog on ordering, checkout, payment processing. We've all seen this, right? We all use Amazon. It's all out there. But then all of this is part of the problem, okay? And you've got a bunch of people here, mostly. I mean, who all are engineers, or who think of them as engineers in this crowd? Majority of you. All right, wonderful. So we tend to operate in a different space, not the problem space, the space of bounded context. And what is that? That is basically the part of the solution. And here is a thing where I'm using some jargon. With an explicit model and language boundaries. I mean, what does that even really mean, right? I mean, the first time I heard something like that, I was like, really? I mean, what is that? But if you want to understand this, it's let's try and do this. We talked about domains, the big picture. We then broke down the problem into smaller portions, subdomains. But they're all still operating in this problem space. This is what your business folks use. This is the language that they speak. But we are software engineers, so we have to translate that into working software. So that's where we do the shift, and this is what domain-driven design calls for things that operate in the solution space. So you can think of bounded contexts as drawing clear lines of sand in the software. So you've got the software, and let's say you're on at a beach and you're drawing lines in sand. And why is it in sand? Because they can change, right? Because business requirements change, domains change, subdomains change. So you may want to erase and start and so on. Or at least you want to make it so that it's fungible. Look, if this still doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. We will try and demystify this further. And by the end of it, if you're still puzzled about it, then again, my name is not Prem. All right, I will use that joke for the last time this presentation, I promise. So just to see if you're all awake, and let's see what is, so these are subdomains, and we've got 3 cases here. One where there is a subdomain which neatly maps to a bounded context. In option B, there is a subdomain which has been broken down into more than one bounded context, each of which is not of the same size. And then in option C, there are multiple subdomains, and there is one bounded context that basically envelops all of them. So the question for you folks is, which of these decompositions is the right one? Anyone? All of them, okay. That's one option, sure. B, okay. A is wishful thinking, all right. C. All right, okay, so we've got what? Anybody says none of these? Anybody? No? Okay. So you've got all of them. You've got A, we've got B, and we've got C. See, that's the problem with bounded context, right? Nobody seems to agree what exactly the right thing is. So what exactly is the right answer, right? Unfortunately, there is no right answer. So all of these are either right or all of these are either wrong. Or one of these is right or not, right? Because in the real world, while you want this, right? You want this this correlation between problem and solution to almost be one-to-one. But that's not how the real world works. The real world is very ugly, very complex. So maybe option B is the right one. Why? Because subdomains tend to be very complex themselves, so it's natural that you try to break them into multiple bounded contexts. But what about C, right? C is probably, folks are thinking definitely C is got to be wrong. How can you have one bounded context that basically covers multiple subdomains? Wow, that seems like legacy code. That seems like the big ball of mud, right? But not necessarily, right? You may have something that's pretty simple. Remember that subdomains are parts of your problem. So not every part of the problem is equally complex. So maybe that is one part of or there are parts of the problem that are peripheral to the core of what you do, and so you probably want to not pay as much attention to it. So that's why answer C might be right. So nevertheless, right, whatever answer you chose, you live in your own reality. And the question is, can you make that better? So let's see, right? But let's come back from the world of theory to the retail world, and what does that look like? So here is my attempt at mapping bounded context to these subdomains. Catalog core, okay, so Now you're probably, and then let's look at some more, right? Cart and checkout, pricing and promos. Oh, okay. Why is pricing and promos in both places? It's in product catalog and also in order and checkout. That seems weird, but there may be portions of that, right? I mean, because subdomains and bounded contexts in the real world don't map exactly. So it is not as if there is going to be one bounded context that covers pretty much everything in a subdomain, or even portions of it. So remember, this is probably like option C. Is this wrong? Look, it really depends. This is my attempt, right? I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong. So the question is, if it's wrong, then we need to find ways to make it better. If it's right, then you're good. So you can keep doing this, right? Okay, so inventory reservation, customer profile, customer support portal, and so on and so forth. The reason why I made this decomposition was to say, okay, what is that MVP? What is that minimal viable product that we can build? And my minimal viable product was this in the world of retail. Okay, so you need to be able to know what you need to sell, so that's catalog core. You need to be able to buy stuff, so that's cart and checkout. They need to have a way to do pricing, so that's that. You need to be able to reserve inventory when an order is being placed. You need to be able to make payments, of course, right? That's how it's a business. And then maybe a simple customer profile and customer support, because sometimes things go wrong. So like, what does the next round look like? Okay, so next round looks like something like this. So now you're trying to actually make it better. So you've got additional things which may not be visible very well in the screen. Search and browse, shipping carrier integration, and so on and so forth. Okay. And if you want to really wow your customers, then this is what it looks like. I'm like, now you're like, Prem, I thought this is a conference. In a conference, everything is supposed to look neat and tidy. This looks very much the exact opposite of neat and tidy. Why? Because this is what the real world is. This is what we go through all the time, right? Where the real world is unforgiving. It's definitely like this picture. Now the question is, how do we derive meaning out of this, and how do we make this a lot more saner? So that's what we will do in part 2. Okay, so enough of the theory, and let's see if we can actually make this somewhat more practical. I don't promise that this is going to be real world, because this is still a conference, right? So I need to keep it in context, no pun intended. So what we'll do is, in part 2, we'll basically do this thing. So I'm a Netflix fan these days, and then on Netflix you've got these web series where you've got seasons and you've got episodes in those seasons. So I thought I'll use that metaphor for this. So basically what I've got is, I've got 3 seasons for you, themed on specific things. I'll let you decide what those are. Actually, I give it out. So the way that this will work is, I'll present a situation and I'll get your opinion on what the problem might be. Then we'll focus on what the impact of that problem is, and finally we'll see how DDD can help us fix the problem, or at least make an attempt at fixing the problem. With me so far? Nobody's sleeping? I don't hear snores, so we're good. All right, so let's start with season 1, Lost in Translation, episode 1. Okay, the status shuffle. What complete really means, right? So complete is a simple word, right? But as you'll find out, it can mean quite a few things. So here is Team Alpha, okay? And they are part of the orders team. And here is a conversation. We're eavesdropping on their conversation. So that's the developer. Her name is Maria. And she says that she's just pushed the code. Order is marked complete in the DB once payment is verified. Then we have got the tester who says, oh, hang on, for my tests, complete means all items are shipped and tracking number is emailed. Okay. What does the product owner say? In my report, an order is only complete after the 14-day return period has expired, okay? And finally, the customer support person who is actually taking angry customer calls says that the customer is actually seeing that their order is processing not complete. This is confusing. You folks seem to say all of these things, but we can't still see complete. What is going on? So, what's the problem here? Anybody? Don't be shy. There's no right or wrong answer here. So, and this is a space where we don't judge. Remember, the doors are closed. Yes, please. Sorry? Yeah. So there is that, right? So I mean, I do say lost in translation, so I probably gave it away. Because complete is actually causing a lot of chaos. So what does this mean? What's the problem? The problem is that the term complete is, in this context, dangerously ambiguous because it means different things to different people, right? And all of these people are apparently part of the same team. They all work for the orders team. And imagine if that's the state of the orders team, what happens outside of that team, right? So what are the implications of this? The implications of this is this one. First one is bugs and rework, right? So now, because your definition of complete and my definition of complete don't match, obviously that difference in understanding is going to result in bugs. Wasted time because you're spending inordinate amounts of meetings trying to discuss what exactly that thing means and not coming to conclusion, and you just move to the next meeting. Metrics, you saw that the product owner was actually looking at a report, and now she's probably not able to see the kinds of orders in the completed status that she was expecting, and turns out her bonus depends on that. Obviously, that's not good. And most importantly maybe, the fact that customers are super frustrated. They do not understand what's going on, and there is nobody who can actually tell them what's going on clearly. So that's the problem. So the first thing is that we need to homogenize, or we need to agree on a shared language, right? So that's the fix, okay? So that's what DDD calls the ubiquitous language, or the language that we should use everywhere, right? Easier said than done. So we really need a more crisp vocabulary. So what does that crisper vocabulary look like? So here is something it might look like, okay? I'm not saying this is what it needs to be, but here, right? I mean, complete actually means a lot of things. Complete means that the payment is verified, items are allocated, shipped, delivered, return window active, order closed. Now, does this mean that we just need to go more fine-grained? Will that help? No, it's actually not just that, right? It's about having terms that are a lot more intention-revealing, and this is an attempt to actually arrive at some clarity, because apparently this is what that order seems to go through in terms of its life cycle. So what does building your shared language actually encompass, right? Okay, so let's look at this. So obviously we talked about forging a ubiquitous language, right? And that ubiquitous language is something that you want to disambiguate or deconstruct ambiguity. You do not want things to be ambiguous. If something is ambiguous, you make noise about it and you try and find clarity. The other thing is, okay, let's say you do that, it's not good enough, you have to make it visible and accessible to everybody. Everybody needs to know. It doesn't help if it's in a product spec somewhere. It has to make it out of that product spec. And then the other thing is that you have to use it. You have to use it pretty much everywhere, right? That's why ubiquitous. It is something that you use pretty much everywhere. And finally, what you want to do is you want to guard it. Why? Because things change, and when things change, the meaning of words changes, and you need the ubiquitous language to keep up, right? And that's what actually working with a ubiquitous language is. So you forge your language, you use it everywhere, and then you keep it up to date. And how do you keep it up to date? By using it in product specs, in architecture diagrams, in code, in documentation, everywhere. Everywhere. I say that again. So that's episode number 1. So there is a possibility that I don't get through every single one of these episodes. Okay, so there are 10 of them. Why 10? Because I thought 10 would be a good number. But if I can't get through, I'm still around, so we can still talk if you're still interested. So don't worry about it. So that leads us to episode number 2. So here is another one in the Lost in Translation season. The customer chameleon, right? So is your customer my customer? So here is another example. So sales context, shipping context. 2 separate, if you want to think of them as departments, think of them as that, right? But in our case, we'll call them bounded contexts because they're boundaries. So here is a conversation. Success just signed up Megacorp Inc. as a new customer. They are ID CUS001. They want 1,000 units of our super widget ASAP. Entered them into the CRM. Sales CRM shows customer Megacorp is active. Okay? All right, so what does the shipping developer say, right? Okay, so Bob says, right, got the order for a customer CUS001, but wait. The system says this customer has no verified shipping address, no loading doc specs, and no receiving hours on file. My team can't even start picking the order. For us, a customer isn't actionable until all logistical info is confirmed. Shipping system shows customer Megacorp status incomplete logistics profile. What's the problem here? Anyone? Yes, that's right. So the term customer is ambiguous here, right? I mean, they're using the exact same term, but in different contexts, and they probably mean the same thing. They probably don't mean the same thing. Clearly, in this case, they don't seem to mean the same thing. So what's going on, right? So you've got customer here, and is it also a customer there in shipping? That's the question, right? So the problem is that the customer term bleeds from the sales context, where it actually means a contractual entity, into shipping, where it means something else, right? So what's the problem here? So what does it actually result in? So here are things that it results in. Operational delays. Clearly, if a customer has placed an order and they can't get it because shipping definitely doesn't know what to do, so they're definitely not getting their order. Operational delays, wasted time, resources. So now you might actually think that there is no order, so you might not pre-order some other things that you depend on, and so on and so forth. Or you might order too many of something. Friction. This is something that we'll all relate to, right? It is shipping's fault. They keep throwing stuff at us. Or why can't shipping be ready? And on the other side, it's like, what is that? Yeah, sales is saying, shipping is never ready. And shipping says, no, they just don't know. They've not given us enough information. How the hell are we supposed to work with it? Poor planning, right? Because now you don't know exactly what to do. You're either too much of something or you've got too little of something. So what can you do to get better? So what you need to do is you need to define these boundaries, which you seem to have done in this case. You've got 2 contexts and they have these boundaries, but what you need to do is most likely this thing which you haven't done, which is that, right? Okay, so you've got shipping and sales. So you define your own language within those boundaries. So here it's called a customer, there it's a logistics prospect. So it's not a customer yet. You guard your boundaries using this thing called an ACL or an anti-corruption layer, which DDD calls, and then you do some explicit translation. So when something interesting happens in the sales context, which is where they've actually placed the order or taken the order, you probably do something interesting in your system, maybe you create a logistics prospect. And then other things may need to happen before items can actually get shipped. Maybe they need to make a payment, or maybe they need to make an installment, what have you, whatever the needs of your business are, right? So the idea is that you do this explicit translation so that the concepts that are valid in sales do not bleed into your own context. Now, what we have done here is we have drawn basically a portion of what is called a context map, right? In this case, there is an upstream-downstream relationship between sales and shipping, and there is an ACL, or an anti-corruption layer, before the integration between sales and shipping happens. There are other relationship types that DDD defines. So obviously, if you extend this picture to your entire system, where you map all of your bounded contexts and the relationships between them, what you have is a context map. How many of us actually have a context map of our system? How many of us? Wow, 2 people. And one person was not very confident, so I'm guessing maybe they have it, they haven't kept it up to date, which means they don't have it. So here is the thing, right? Definitely do this. If you complain that nothing is clear, everything is up in the air, this is what you might want to do, right? Try and figure out, at least for the context that you are working in, right? What is upstream, what is downstream? And maybe that will inspire others to do the same thing as well. Okay, so here is one of my favorites. The dictionary dictatorship. So here is something that you will find amusing. So here is an announcement. Corporate memo. Effective Q3, all systems will standardize on the enterprise party model. A party can be an individual, organization, employee, customer, vendor, or internal department. The party object will contains 275 attributes. Okay? Including date of birth for individuals, VAT number for organizations, blah, 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 right? All right. How many of us have tried to create this thing called a customer 360? Quite a few of us, right? How is that going? Is that actually done? Okay. So here is the thing, right? By the way, I'm not trying to diss this, okay? I'm not trying to make fun of the people who are building customer 360s. So clearly there is value in that. But look at this, right? Marketing team lead says for every website we track as a party, we now have to consider forklift certification expiry. That's a lot of irrelevant data. Okay. For every website visitor we track as a party, we have to consider forklift certification expiry. Oops, that's a copy-paste error. And then the third thing is we are trying to map detailed employees with specific payroll, and the generic party model is a nightmare for reporting. So really, I mean, what we are trying to say is that each of these do not care about the entire party. They only care about subsets of the party. So trying to impose this one ring that will rule them all is tough. So what do we have, right? Marketing, warehouse, HR, all depending on party. Okay, the single point of failure. None of them are happy. Okay. So the problem is this. One overly generalized model is very, very tough to work with for everyone. I mean, it's a noble thought maybe, but very, very hard to pull off in practice. Very, very hard. So if there is one thing that you take from here, right, it is that, okay, I have to stop trying. Maybe, you probably do want to understand, but you want to understand them in different contexts. So customer, or party in this case, maybe 275 attributes. Maybe there is some place where you want to see all of them together, or at least do some correlations, because analytics is something, right? Okay, they bought this thing 3 years ago, they might want to do this now, and so on and so forth. Absolutely. So I'm not trying to say that you should not try to correlate things, but creating this one model, one domain model for everything is very, very tough, very, very hard to pull off. In fact, I might even say that it's almost impossible. And in fact, I have not seen any place that I've worked at. And I work for a consultancy called ThoughtWorks. So if you know Martin Fowler works for that company. So I have not, and I've been there for 20 years now, right? So I have not seen this, and we work with a lot of clients. But nevertheless, we are developers, engineers, architects. We will not stop trying just because I said so, right? Why should you? Obviously, I've really hammered home this thing, bloat and complexity. Loss of precision, because now, I mean, you're one thing, doesn't make sense in the other context and so on. Obviously, a lot of effort, because now you've got a lot more to deal with. Everybody has a lot more to deal with. And obviously, when you've got a lot more to deal with than what is necessary, obviously the pace at which you can move obviously goes down. And this is what 2025, the age of generative AI. So obviously, that's not good. So what do you do to fix this? What can we do? So the first thing is to obviously get rid of the party model. Okay, I mean, that's a bit extreme. But at least what you can do is probably reduce the dependency of something like that on real stuff, right? So now marketing, warehouse, and HR need to do their thing. Now here is what I'm saying, right? I'm not against reuse, by the way. Okay, so some people are like, what? Now you want everybody to start defining their own thing? No, that's not what I'm trying to say. The party model is something that is too much of a good thing. Okay, so there is a balance somewhere. Gregor talked about this Goldilocks zone, just right. So it's a tough balance to maintain, but I mean, going the extreme right of trying to reuse everything is really a bit of a fallacy. Okay, so what can we do better? So here is something, right? Context is everything, really, right? So within that bounded context, do not tolerate anything that does not make sense. Okay, now you're like, okay, but what if I need it for tomorrow? I might need it for tomorrow. This is 2025. We have got enough tools, enough know-how to be able to add, modify things. Okay, so, and the other thing is, it's impossible to predict the future. If you say that you are able to do that because you are experienced, tell me, were you able to predict Gen AI? Were you able to predict COVID? Right? And all of those had a significant impact on our business. It was impossible to predict. So stop pretending that you can. Use what you need today and stop speculating. Because we are software engineers, we are not astrologers, not soothsayers. Model what you need, of course. Now here is the thing, right? I mean, this is probably controversial. Duplication, I mean, dry, what is that? Don't repeat yourself, right? Anybody read the Pragmatic Programmer? They say this. Your system should be dry, and I forget, dry, shy, encapsulate, and dry, shy, and now I'm drawing a blank. Obviously, the moment is gone. But but my point is this, right? If you Google OO in one sentence, dry, shy, and tell the other guy. Okay, so your object should tell, not ask. Okay, so that's that. But then that principle does not apply here all the time, right? Because there is no one universal rule, unfortunately, in software. So some amount of duplication is almost necessary to gain the independence. Otherwise, everything is dependent on everything, right? So reuse and what is that? Independence are almost two opposing forces, and you have to again try and find balance. And this thing, right? Integrate explicitly. So in this case, in the previous case, we saw that there was that anti-corruption layer. There are others, like I said, there is the open host service, there is the partnership relationship, and so on and so forth. So when you're integrating, be sure that this is something that you're doing consciously. Okay? If you want to share data, then do this through a well-defined API or an event or something which DDD calls the open host service over a published language. Right? Yeah, so like I said, right, I mean, this is not about trying to say that these things don't actually work, or reuse is bad. But you need to be conscious about what you reuse versus what you don't, right? Because now, if you really want to move quickly, then you need to sacrifice one or the other, at least for some of the time. So that concludes season 1. So now we are into season 2, and I have 15 minutes apparently, so I'm really running short on time. So, but I'm a developer, I'm usually wrong on my estimates. So here is the thing, okay? So monolith maximus. So you're like, okay, isn't this the same as the party? No, it's not, right? And here is how. So we need to update the party password policy. User profile should be quick, okay? And billing engine reads directly from there, and so on and so forth. Okay, a change last year broke reporting. And here's the product owner. Now they want to add a new feature. I mean, these pesky product owners always wanting to add something new and break things. And the architect says that means that we have to touch product catalog, user profiles, blah, blah, blah. So lots of things. That was 6 months of work. And obviously, this is also comes with a lot of regression testing, which was pretty tough last time. So what is the problem? The problem is this, right? That's the big ball of mud, right? Everybody knows that. So monoliths aren't bad, but big balls of mud are bad, because now when you need to make a change, if you are in this situation where you have to change a lot of things, then you've got a big ball of mud. You don't have a modular monolith. So what is the implication? Slow development. Risk of failure is really, really high. Massive cognitive load, because now when you make a change, you need to be aware of so many things. And scaling something is difficult, because if you scale everything, you have to scale pretty much all of the system or none of it. Really, really hard to do. So how do you fix this? So here is how you fix it. One way to fix it, okay? So I know it's a bit subtle. Big ball of mud, reducing in size, and you're trying to extract these strands out. Unfortunately, if you're here, you're in a tough situation, right? There is no easy answer here. It's just that you have to do this one by one. Unfortunately, no silver bullet that DDD has to offer. We all have to do this hard work. So the thing that you want to do is here, if you're stuck in this kind of situation, you want to figure out, okay, what those business domains are. Start there, break them down into the subdomains, like we said. And then try and carve out specific bounded contexts. Okay, now this is easier said than done. How do you do this? So now you do need help from your business owners. You do need help from your architects. You do need help from people who know how the code works. All of that, right? So, like I said, this is not easy, but you've got to start somewhere. So start. Okay, a lot of us are content at admiring the problem and bitching about how the world is going to end. But if you start, you can make a difference. I know I'm skimping on this, right? But there is something that I'll give you so that you can go look at it in more detail. So the thing that you want to try and do is one context, one team. This is ideal, okay? I mean, you probably can't be there. Your reality might be that it's a lot more complicated than that. But if you want to try doing this, so now, and a team doesn't need to mean like 10 people on a team, right? Team can be a team of 2, or even a team of 1 or 2. I mean, yeah, 2 probably, because you don't want the hit by the bus syndrome, right? So you need probably 2. So establish explicit contracts. So this whole idea of contract testing, because we are in this land of microservices, which means we're talking across remote boundaries. So now there are frameworks. Pact, for example, is something that you should consider using to test contracts without having to resort to end-to-end tests exclusively. Right? It's easy enough to do. It's been around for the last 15 years. Of course, this is easy enough to say. So here is the thing. So start strategically, right? So I told you, so there is an article that I had the opportunity of writing. It's on our website. If you care, it's a 3-part article. You can take a look and you can find, beyond this this conference, is there something more you have to offer? Yes, there is. So lots of techniques there. It's should be helpful. Okay. So the 5th episode then, and the second one in this season, is this layer cake illusion. Everybody likes layers. In fact, DDD actually preaches that that you should layer your system, and that's a good thing. But then here is the opposite of that. Okay, so here is a product owner, need a country of origin field for our products. It needs to show on the product page, be validated in the business rules and stored in the database. Okay, all right. UI team lead, okay, we'll add the field, but we'll call the business logic context to handle it. Okay, and then we'll add it to the data access context. And data team lead, that means that we have to update this in the country of origin in our schema. So 3 contexts: UI, backend, data, and architect. For this one small feature, we've got 3 contexts. So what do you do, right? So what is our problem right now? We've got 3 contexts: UI, business logic, data access. Imagine if we had, this is how things get done, right? So you manage products, orders, and so on and so forth. There's very seldom do you have stuff that you do in just the UI or just the data or just the backend. Usually it is cross-cutting. So if that is the case, then if you break down your contexts along horizontal lines, then obviously you're going to suffer pain. So yeah, I mean this is the problem. Like we said, it's horizontally aligned. Are horizontally aligned always problematic? No. But you want your horizontals to remain close so that they are, because this is how you provide value. So align along business value. Okay. So if I'm not saying that you should not have a UI team, okay, fine. I mean, look, but if a majority of the work that you do requires you to cross-cut across all of these layers, then clearly you've got it not right. Yeah, high feature coupling, because now you've got coupling across these layers. Synchronous deployments, you have to synchronize between these layers. So UI is cannot deploy without the backend, and so on. Knowledge is fragmented because nobody really knows what the end-to-end thing does, because now knowledge is, some of it is in the UI, some of it is in the backend, and some of it is somewhere else. And the UI is where a lot of the customer interactions happen. So when you're in a jam, what are you going to do? You're going to put the logic in a place where it expedites your ability to ship. So you will end up in that UI having too much logic. Our business logic layer is just a crud. It's just anemic, and so on, right? So if you're finding yourself in that kind of situation, that's your problem. Communication overhead, of course, right? What do you do to fix it? You align your bounded context this way, right? Focus on business capabilities, because if you do that and you align your teams along that. So this is not to say that everybody needs to know everything, right? I mean, should I now become a UI expert and a backend expert and a data expert and an analytics expert and whatever else, right? No, you can have cross-functional teams to compose your bounded context. It doesn't need to be that everybody on the team needs to be a UI developer. No. Vertical slicing, okay. Again, one context, one team, right? Cross-functional teams, we talked about that. And full lifecycle ownership. So if you do this, then you are going to maximize the way that you structure your bounded context, and the more that you can get out of them. Okay. The exact opposite. So now you're like, we've got monoliths. Now the exact opposite. The swarm of gnats. Okay, so microservices, nanoservices, functions as a service, what have you, right? I mean, yeah, so all the buzzwords. They're so tiny now that they cause more problems than they actually solve. So you've gone, yeah, everybody says, we shall not have monoliths. So what do? We create microservices and nanoservices. So here is a not so unreal world, okay? What is this? This is apparently how you create an order and you fulfill it. You might think that this is definitely not real. Actually, this is real. So I kid you not, this is something that we had in one of our clients, who shall obviously not be named. But each of these boxes are actually independent, well, not independent. They are services that are remote from each other. I'm like, really, what is this, right? I mean, really, do we need to be this fine-grained? But you know what, now, if we were able to deploy each of these independently, we can actually fix problems just in the validated address service, right? How amazing would that be? That's maximum independence. But unfortunately, that's not how things work. So here is a new dev. I need to understand the order placement flow. Where do I start? Okay. Senior dev says, okay, wait, well, for a single order, it hits create order shell service, then it calls out to something else, and there are several other services. Okay. When an order fails, this is someone who is in ops, okay? I mean, now you're like, okay, we are in the DevOps world. What are you talking about, Prem? Are you still talking about ops as a separate thing? I mean, yeah, I know, but some of us still live in this world, right? Now, when you have a problem, good luck. Here is a product owner. Again, these product owners, I tell you, they keep coming back, trying to add new features and making us look bad. I wish they stopped doing that. But then we might not have a job. Okay, so here is what an architect says, or senior dev says, you know what, so maybe there is a 16th service that we need to add. Why not? So what is the problem here? The problem is this, right? Bounded contexts, microservices, nanoservices. Again, you don't follow the business, you're going to find yourself in pain. Whether you do monoliths, whether you do microservices. So what you need to do is you need to break your bounded context into things that closely align with your subdomains. So while the ideal of one subdomain to one bounded context may not be possible, you want to tend towards that. Okay, and if you're able to do that, it's great. You can break down a subdomain into multiple bounded contexts because there are certain things that might be very specific to a certain part of your business, and we'll come to that, time permitting. So here's the thing, right? All distributed monolith, right? It's still a monolith. Why? Because you're still having to deploy a lot of these things together. Huge operational complexity. So what do you want to do? So you probably want to find something that is in the middle, right? So we have tried to take a swag at breaking it into less fine-grained components. We talked about this. Transaction boundaries matter, right? So if something has to be done atomically, if you have them in two separate components, it's almost impossible to do it. Okay, there is this thing called distributed transactions. They are very, very hard to pull off. They're very, very hard to scale. So the easier thing might be to just collapse them into one. If you want ACID, right? Yep, okay, so high cohesion, low coupling, right? Okay, so now So now if you really want this, right? So cohesion coupling, again, two seemingly opposite ends of the spectrum. So there is that. Again, you need to have a good understanding of why you're doing this, not because you're in the business of resume-driven development, right? This is easier to do. So breaking down large monoliths, which are modular more or less, is easier than to do the other. At least that's what experience tells me. Okay, so last episode, but I think we have run out of time. So, wow, I mean, what? We did 6, is it? Yeah, 6. So 4 more remaining. But I don't know, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to stop here or this is uncharted territory for me. So I'll continue for a little while, but if you have to leave, please feel free, right? I don't want to keep you between lunch and me, right? So great. So last one in this episode, in this season, is this. Remember we said that not all subdomains and bounded contexts are created equal. Okay, so certain parts of your business are probably your secret sauce. So here is the thing, right? So now, churn prediction engine is our number one strategic asset, and we need to iterate on its AI model to stay ahead. Okay, that's what the CEO wants. Here is what the lead dev says. But the customer success hub also manages this, and this thing is part of that. Okay, great, all right. So which means that it's going to take a lot more time, is what the lead dev is trying to tell us. And also, it needs a different set of hardware, apparently, whereas the customer success hub just runs on general purpose hardware. So if you want to introduce AI, probably that's not going to be possible again, or it's going to be harder. So then, here is the thing. Okay, I was assigned to enhance the knowledge base, right? Okay, so this is what they're saying. And I have to be very careful not to break this, because remember what the CEO said. Number one strategic asset. If that fails, probably lots of implications for the business. So here is what it leads us to, right? So now we have got a few things, and we have this map now. What is this map? So this is a core domain chart. And what you have here is this, right? Core, supporting, and generic. And if you see, onboarding wizard is probably just a supporting feature for your business. Automated helpful email, probably very generic. You can probably buy it off the shelf. Knowledge base, again, pretty generic, can buy it. User feedback collection forms, important, but again, not critical. What is most critical is that. So what you want to do is you want to isolate that part from the rest of your business, right? Because this coupling exists, now you put that at risk, and you compromise the ability to make enhancements to it at pace. So this is the last one, so we are done almost. And for the other 3, we can meet in the hallway. So the problem is this, the coupling between non-core parts of your business to the core parts of your business. So you want to decouple those, and if you don't, you face these problems. Innovation stagnation because there's too much coupling. Technical compromises, we talked about how they need separate kinds of hardware. Talent misallocation. For your core, you need your best people, right? No doubt. But for the rest, you probably can get away with outsourcing it even. So what is the fix? You break it down again, and then you isolate the core using ACLs on one side and exposing open host services on the other. And that is how you can get better. Identify, classify, do this exercise, right? Do a strategic domain, core domain chart, plot your bounded context, and see where your most critical things are. Isolate your core and recognize this treatment, right? And finally, when you're coupling, make sure you're conscious about it. So pretty much that's it. Thank you, folks. I really appreciate it.